My name is Abram, and I just turned 67. All my life I worked construction to give my son Thomas everything I never had. When he invited me to dinner for my birthday, I thought it meant he finally appreciated my sacrifices. Instead, he handed me a glossy brochure for Sunset Meadows Nursing Home. As he explained why I should consider it, I smiled politely, hiding how my heart was shattering. What he never expected was how that painful moment would completely transform both our lives. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button. Trust me, you'll want to see how I maintained my dignity while teaching my son a lesson he'll never forget. When I look back at my life, sacrifice is the word that comes to mind most often. Not that I regret it, mind you. Raising Thomas became my whole world after my wife Margaret died of breast cancer when he was just 10 years old. I still remember the night she made me promise to make sure our boy would have every opportunity in life. "Abram," she whispered, holding my hand with what little strength she had left. "Promise me you'll make sure Thomas gets to college. Promise me he won't have to break his back working construction like you." I promised her, and I kept that promise no matter what it cost me. After Margaret passed, I threw myself into being both mother and father to Thomas. I picked up every extra shift I could at the construction company, often working 16-hour days. My foreman Frank would sometimes find me asleep in my truck before morning shifts, having come straight from a night job. "You're going to work yourself to death, Abram," he'd say, handing me a coffee. "Whatever it takes" was always my answer. The physical toll was immense. Construction isn't kind to a man's body. By 40, my back was already giving me trouble. By 50, my knees had joined the rebellion, but I never complained. Every ache was worth it when I saw Thomas bringing home straight A's, winning academic competitions, and eventually getting accepted to an Ivy League college with a partial scholarship. I sold my father's vintage Mustang to help cover the tuition gap. Dad had left me that car when he passed, and it was my most prized possession. Thomas knew how much I loved that car, but he never knew I sold it for him. I told him I had grown tired of maintaining it. In truth, I cried the day the new owner drove it away. When the company offered early retirement packages during a downsizing when I was 58, I turned it down despite my aching joints. Thomas was in law school by then, and I needed 3 more years of solid income to see him through. My coworkers thought I was crazy to pass up the generous offer. "Your body's telling you it's time, Abram," my buddy Steve warned me. But I stayed because Thomas needed me to. Through all this, I watched my son transform from a grateful, loving child into an ambitious young man. I couldn't have been prouder when he graduated from law school, near the top of his class, and landed a position at a prestigious corporate law firm in the city. The changes were subtle at first. His calls became less frequent. When we did talk, he seemed distracted, often cutting our conversations short because of work commitments. I understood. He was building his career just as I had wanted for him. When he married Jennifer, a marketing executive from a wealthy family, I noticed how uncomfortable he seemed introducing me to her parents. They owned a chain of luxury car dealerships and lived in a mansion that made my modest 3-bedroom house look like a storage shed. "Dad," Thomas whispered to me at the rehearsal dinner, "maybe don't talk too much about the construction stories. Okay, Jennifer's family is pretty sophisticated." It stung, but I nodded and smiled. I wanted him to be happy and successful, even if that meant I didn't quite fit into his new world. Over the last decade, our relationship dwindled to obligatory holiday phone calls and our annual birthday dinner. Thomas would take me to an expensive restaurant where I felt out of place in my best clothes that were never quite good enough. He would pay the bill with a flourish of his platinum credit card, as if reminding me of his success. Still, I cherished those dinners. They were my once-a-year chance to see my son in person, and in recent years to see my grandchildren, though they barely knew me. Thomas and Jennifer had 2 kids, Emma and Jack, who were 8 and 6 now. Sweet children, but they looked at me like I was a stranger, which I suppose I was. All this time I lived alone in the house where Thomas grew up. I kept it neat and maintained it myself despite the arthritis that had settled into my hands. I had a small circle of friends, mostly other retirees from the construction company, but many had moved away to be closer to their own children, or to retire somewhere warmer. Recently, I'd had some minor health issues. Nothing serious, just the expected wear and tear on a body that had worked hard for over 40 years. I'd fallen in the bathroom once and bruised my hip. My doctor suggested I install grab bars, which I did myself the following weekend. I had some trouble with my blood pressure, but medication was keeping it under control. I never complained to Thomas about any of this. I didn't want to worry him, or worse, have him think I needed help. I valued my independence fiercely and was determined to maintain it. So when my 67th birthday approached and Thomas called to invite me to dinner at Le Chateau, the fanciest restaurant in town, I was genuinely touched. Maybe things were changing. Maybe he wanted to reconnect. I allowed myself to hope that perhaps after all these years, my son was beginning to appreciate the sacrifices I had made. I spent nearly $100 I couldn't really spare on a new shirt for the occasion. The sales girl at the department store helped me pick out something contemporary but age-appropriate, as she put it. Looking in the mirror that evening, I thought I looked pretty good for 67. Older, sure, with my silver hair and the deep lines around my eyes, but still strong, still standing tall. Margaret would be proud of us both, I said to my reflection, straightening my collar one last time before heading out to the dinner that would change everything. The restaurant was as intimidating as I remembered from previous years. Crystal chandeliers hung from high ceilings, and waiters in bow ties glided silently between tables covered in pristine white tablecloths. I felt immediately out of place despite my new shirt, aware of my calloused hands and the slight limp I had developed from years of climbing scaffolding. Thomas, Jennifer, and the kids were already seated when I arrived. My son stood and gave me a brief formal hug. "Happy birthday, Dad," he said, his cologne expensive and unfamiliar. "Grandpa," Emma said with the enthusiasm only an 8-year-old can muster. Jack offered a shy wave, partially hiding behind his tablet. Jennifer air-kissed near my cheek. "You look well, Abram," she said, though her eyes were already drifting back to her phone. I settled into my chair, genuinely happy to see them all, despite the formality. "Thank you for inviting me. It means a lot to see you all." The waiter appeared immediately, and Thomas ordered an expensive bottle of wine without consulting the price. I remembered when he was a teenager and would calculate the exact cost of groceries as we shopped, helping me stay within our tight budget. The conversation was pleasant enough at first. Thomas talked about his recent promotion to junior partner. Jennifer mentioned a marketing campaign she was working on for a luxury watch company. I listened attentively, asking questions and expressing pride in their accomplishments. When they asked about me, I kept it light and positive. I mentioned the new bird feeder I had built for my backyard and how I was enjoying watching the cardinals and blue jays it attracted. I didn't mention the doctor's visits or how the property taxes on my house had increased again, stretching my fixed income even thinner. "So how's retirement treating you, Dad?" Thomas asked as the waiter cleared our appetizer plates. "Keeping busy." "Busy enough," I said with a smile. "I help Steve out sometimes with small jobs. Nothing too strenuous. And I volunteer at the community center on Thursdays." Thomas and Jennifer exchanged a look I couldn't quite interpret. "Actually, Dad," Thomas said, his voice taking on the same tone he used when speaking to clients, "that's something we wanted to talk to you about." My stomach tightened with instinctive apprehension. "We've been thinking about your future," Jennifer added, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. Thomas reached down beside his chair and produced a large envelope. "We got you something for your birthday that we think you should consider." My heart lifted momentarily. Despite everything, I felt a flash of warmth that they had remembered to get me a gift. In previous years, it had often been a gift card to a hardware store, impersonal, but at least practical. But when Thomas slid the contents from the envelope across the table, my momentary joy evaporated. It wasn't a gift at all. It was a brochure, glossy and colorful, showing smiling elderly people in wheelchairs being pushed by uniformed caregivers. "Sunset Meadows, where golden years shine brightest," proclaimed the title in cheerful font. "It's one of the best assisted living facilities in the state," Thomas explained, his voice measured and reasonable. "They have an excellent medical staff, daily activities, and even a small woodworking shop I thought you might enjoy." I stared at the brochure, unable to fully process what was happening. My son was giving me a nursing home brochure for my birthday. Not a gift, not a keepsake, but a not-so-subtle suggestion that I was becoming a burden they needed to place somewhere. "We toured it last month," Jennifer added, as if this were a selling point rather than a further shock. "The rooms are quite spacious for this type of facility." The phrase, "this type of facility," hung in the air between us. I looked up to see Emma watching me with confused curiosity. Jack remained oblivious, playing a game on his tablet. Thomas and Jennifer were looking at me expectantly, as if they had just presented me with a wonderful opportunity rather than a devastating rejection. "Dad," Thomas continued when I didn't immediately respond, "you're getting older, and with your health concerns, we think it would be best if you were somewhere with professional care available. Somewhere you wouldn't have to worry about maintaining a house or being alone if something happened." My health concerns, I had mentioned nothing beyond ordinary complaints during our infrequent calls. How much had he been assuming about my condition without ever asking me directly? "The fall you had last year really worried us," Jennifer chimed in, though I had never told them about my bathroom fall. Someone else must have mentioned it to them, perhaps my neighbor Saun, who occasionally spoke to Thomas. "And Sunset Meadows has an excellent memory care unit," Thomas added, "just in case that becomes necessary down the road." Memory care. I had never shown any signs of dementia or memory loss. The implications stung worse than any physical pain I had endured. "I see," I managed to say, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. "And when were you thinking I should consider this move?" Thomas relaxed slightly, apparently interpreting my question as interest rather than shock. "Well, they have an opening coming up in 2 months. We could get your house on the market right away. The neighborhood has appreciated considerably, so the sale should cover your stay at Sunset Meadows for quite some time." The casual way he discussed selling my home, the house where I had raised him, where every corner held memories of our life together, and of Margaret, felt like a physical blow. "I took the liberty of speaking with a real estate agent," he continued. "She thinks we could get at least $300,000 for it in the current market. He had said we could get $300,000, as if the house and the decision were partly his. Perhaps in his mind, they already were. I looked down at the brochure again, forcing my face to remain neutral despite the storm of emotions inside me. A photo showed elderly residents playing bingo, their expressions ranging from vacant to mildly interested. Another showed a cafeteria with long tables. "Restaurant-style dining," the caption proclaimed, though it looked nothing like the elegant restaurant where we were currently sitting. "This is quite a surprise," I finally said, fighting to keep my voice steady. "I know change can be difficult at your age," Jennifer said, reaching across to pat my hand condescendingly. "But trust us, this is for the best. You'll have people your own age to socialize with, and you won't have to worry about anything." people my own age, as if I were a child who needed to be with my peer group, as if my own son and his family had no place for me in their lives, except as an occasional visitor, perhaps to their home from my new residence at Sunset Meadows. "And we could visit you," Thomas added, though something in his tone suggested these visits would be infrequent at best. "The kids could see you more regularly." The same kids who barely knew me now, who would know me even less when I was removed to a facility across town. The waiter arrived with our main courses, and I was grateful for the interruption. It gave me a moment to compose myself, to push down the hurt and betrayal threatening to overwhelm me. Throughout the remainder of the meal, I smiled and nodded at appropriate intervals as Thomas outlined his plan for my future. I asked a few questions about the facility, pretending to consider it seriously. All the while, my mind was reeling, my heart breaking at the realization of how my son truly saw me, not as the father who had sacrificed everything for him, but as an aging problem to be managed and tucked away. When the check came, Thomas paid it with a flourish, as always. "Happy birthday, Dad," he said again, as if the brochure were a genuine gift rather than a dismissal from their lives. "Thank you for dinner," I replied, my social autopilot taking over while my true self retreated deep inside to lick my wounds, "and for thinking of my future." In the parking lot, Thomas gave me another formal hug. "Just think about it, okay? We can help with all the arrangements." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak further. I got into my 10-year-old sedan, watching in the rearview mirror as Thomas helped his family into their luxury SUV. As they pulled away, Jennifer didn't look back, but I saw Emma wave from the back window. I waved back, wondering when or if I would see my grandchildren again, if I refused this gift. The drive home was a blur. I was operating on pure muscle memory, stopping at red lights and turning at familiar corners, while my mind tried to process the evening's events. Only when I pulled into my driveway and turned off the engine did the full weight of what had happened descend upon me. In the darkness of my car parked in front of the home where I had raised my son alone after losing my beloved wife, I finally allowed the tears to come. They were not gentle tears, but wrenching sobs that shook my entire body. I cried for Margaret, for the promises I had kept to her at such cost to myself. I cried for the little boy Thomas had once been, who had looked at me with such love and admiration. Most of all, I cried for myself, for the father who had given everything only to be handed a nursing home brochure on his 67th birthday. Eventually, the tears subsided, leaving me empty and exhausted. I looked up at my house, the porch light I had left on glowing softly in the darkness. Whatever Thomas might think, this was my home. I had maintained it with my own hands for decades. Every repair, every improvement had been done by me. It might not be a mansion, but it was mine, and it held the story of my life within its walls. As I finally got out of the car and walked up the path to my front door, one thought crystallized in my mind. This was not how my story would end. Not with a whimper, not with a surrender, and certainly not with a move to Sunset Meadows. That night was the longest of my life. Sleep was impossible as my mind raced through memories and emotions, each more painful than the last. I sat in my recliner, the one Margaret and I had bought together when she was pregnant with Thomas, and stared at the nursing home brochure on my coffee table. Around 2 a.m, I got up and began walking through my house, touching familiar objects, remembering the stories behind each one. In Thomas's old bedroom, now my home office, I opened the closet where I kept boxes of his childhood mementos. I pulled them out one by one, spreading their contents across the carpet. There were his report cards, all excellent. Drawings he had made for me, stick figures labeled Dad and me, standing beside a house with a bright yellow sun above. Awards from science fairs and debate competitions. A Father's Day card that read, To the best dad in the world. Thanks for always being there for me. Love, Thomas. That card was from when he was 15, 2 years before he left for college. Had he meant it then, or was it just something a kid writes because that's what you're supposed to say to your father? In another box, I found financial records. I had kept meticulously throughout Thomas's childhood and young adulthood. Tuition payments for his undergraduate degree in law school. The receipt from when I sold the Mustang showing exactly how that money had gone straight to his education. Medical bills from when he broke his arm playing soccer in high school, and I had taken an extra weekend job to cover the deductible. Looking at those papers now, I felt a surge of anger replacing the hurt. Had Thomas ever truly understood what I had given up for him? Did he have any idea of the physical pain I endured working constructions into my late 50s to fund his education? Did he realize that I had postponed my own retirement, ignored my doctor's warnings about my back, all to give him the opportunities he now took for granted? I found photos from his law school graduation. There I was, standing proudly beside him in a suit I had bought specially for the occasion, one that had stretched my budget for months afterward. I remembered how out of place I had felt among the other parents, many of them professionals themselves, with smooth hands and expensive watches. But I had been so proud that day, so certain that all my sacrifices had been worthwhile. "Look at us, Margaret," I had whispered that night, looking at the photo after returning to my hotel room. "Our boy did it. He's going to have the life we dreamed of for him." Now I wondered if that life included any place for me beyond an occasional duty visit to Sunset Meadows. As dawn began to lighten the sky outside, I found myself at my lowest point. Maybe Thomas was right. Maybe I was just a burden now. My body did ache constantly from decades of physical labor. I did worry sometimes about falling again, perhaps more seriously next time. Maybe I should just accept the inevitable and go quietly to the facility he had chosen, spending my final years in a small room playing bingo with strangers. Exhausted, I finally returned to my bedroom and sat heavily on the edge of the bed. As I did, my eyes fell on the small wooden box on my nightstand. It contained the few letters Margaret had written to me during our marriage, mostly from when I was working out of state on construction projects before Thomas was born. With trembling hands, I opened the box and took out the last letter she had written, just weeks before her death. I had read it so many times over the years that the paper was soft and the creases well worn. By heart, I knew what it said, but something compelled me to read it again as the first light of day filtered through my curtains. "My dearest Abram," it began in Margaret's neat handwriting. "As I write this, you are asleep in the chair beside my hospital bed, so devoted, so tired. The doctors say my time is growing short, and there are things I need to say to you while I still can. You have been the love of my life, my rock, my everything. I know you will keep your promise to raise our Thomas with all the opportunities we dreamed of for him. But I want you to promise me something else too. Promise me you will not lose yourself in grief or in sacrifice. Promise me you will remember that you deserve happiness and respect not just from others, but from yourself. There will come a day when Thomas is grown and gone, building his own life as he should. When that day comes, remember that your life is still your own, still valuable, still full of purpose. Stand tall, my love. Never let anyone make you feel small or unwanted, not even our son. You have too much strength, too much dignity to ever be diminished. All my love now and always, Margaret." As I finished reading, tears streamed down my face once more. But these were different from the tears I had shed in the car. These were tears of clarity, of resolve forming. Margaret had known somehow that I would need these words someday. She had seen my tendency to give everything, to expect nothing, to accept whatever scraps of affection came my way. "Stand tall," I whispered, repeating her words. "Never let anyone make you feel small or unwanted." I carefully folded the letter and returned it to its box. Then I showered, shaved, and dressed in clean clothes. I made coffee and toast, forcing myself to eat, despite my lack of appetite. As the caffeine cleared the fog of my sleepless night, my mind began to work not on how to accept Thomas's plan, but on how to forge my own. This was not about revenge. I loved my son despite everything, and I understood that his perspective had been shaped by his new life, his ambitious wife, the social circle they inhabited, where aging parents were problems to be managed rather than wisdom to be treasured. But understanding did not mean I had to accept the role they had assigned me. No, this would be about self-respect, about standing tall as Margaret had urged me to do, about showing my son that his father was not a burden to be placed in storage, but a man with dignity, purpose, and life still to be lived. By the time I finished my coffee, the first glimmers of a plan were forming in my mind. I would need help, information, and time. But for the first time since I had been handed that brochure, I felt something other than despair. I felt the stirring of determination, of the same grit that had carried me through decades of hard labor and harder choices. I picked up my phone and made the first of many calls that would change the course of my remaining years. Not in the direction Thomas had planned, but in one of my own choosing. My first call was to my old friend Ray, who had retired from construction a few years before me and gone into real estate as a second career. I knew he would give me honest advice about my house's value, not just tell me what I wanted to hear. "Abram, buddy, long time no talk. How have you been?" Ray's booming voice brought an immediate smile to my face. "Been better, to be honest," I replied, and briefly explained the situation with Thomas and the nursing home brochure. There was a long pause before Ray responded. "That's rough, man, really rough. But you know what? They're lost if they can't see what they've got in you." That simple validation meant more than he could know. "So what can I do to help?" Ray asked. "I need to know what my house is really worth in today's market, and I need to understand my options." Ray came over that afternoon. As we walked through my home, he took notes and explained how the neighborhood had changed since I had bought the house 35 years ago. "You're sitting on a gold mine, Abram," he said finally. "This area has been completely transformed in the last decade. The school district is top-rated now, and young families are desperate to buy in. Your 3-bedroom with the large yard and the established trees. You're looking at close to 400,000, maybe more if we stage it right." The figure shocked me. I had paid $75,000 for the house back in 1990. "That's 100,000 more than what Thomas said," I murmured. Ray's expression darkened. "Did he get that estimate from a realtor friend of his by any chance?" I nodded, remembering Thomas mentioning a real estate agent he knew through Jennifer's family. "Thought so," Ray said grimly. "Look, I don't want to cause family problems, but you should know that if they lowballed the estimate, the difference would have gone somewhere, and it wouldn't have been to you." The implication was clear, and it sent a chill through me. Was it possible that Thomas and Jennifer had planned to pocket the difference between what they told me the house was worth and its actual value? I didn't want to believe it, but the seed of doubt had been planted. My next call was to Sarah Jenkins, a financial advisor who attended my church. Sarah had always been friendly, offering free advice after services to anyone who asked. She agreed to meet me for coffee the next day. Over steaming mugs at the local diner, Sarah reviewed my financial situation, my construction pension, my modest savings, my Social Security benefits, and the potential proceeds from selling my house. "Abram," she said after crunching the numbers, "you're actually in much better shape than you realize. With proper management, you could live very comfortably for the rest of your life, even accounting for potential healthcare costs. Comfortable enough to not need a nursing home? I asked. Absolutely, she confirmed. Unless you develop serious health issues requiring round-the-clock care, there's no financial reason you would need to enter a facility like Sunset Meadows. In fact, she added, looking at their fee structure in the brochure I had brought, this place would actually drain your resources unnecessarily. Their basic monthly fee is nearly 3 times what your current housing costs are. On my way home from meeting Sarah, I stopped at the community center where I occasionally volunteered. Martha, the director, was always trying to get me more involved. Today, I was ready to listen. "Abram," she exclaimed when I walked in. "Just the man I need. Our handyman canceled again, and the sink in the craft room is leaking." I smiled and rolled up my sleeves. "Point me to your toolbox." As I fixed the sink, Martha chatted about the center's programs. "We're starting a new initiative for active seniors," she explained. "Classes, social events, even a job skills program for those looking to work part-time. We've got a computer course starting next week that's already full, but I could squeeze you in." Computer course. I had basic skills but had never been particularly tech-savvy. Trust me, it's life-changing for many of our members. Being able to research online, connect with others, even start small businesses from home. One gentleman who took the course last year now does bookkeeping for local shops, makes a tidy sum, and works entirely from his home office. The idea intrigued me. I had always been good with numbers, managing my limited budget with precision throughout Thomas's childhood. "Sign me up," I said impulsively. Martha beamed. "Wonderful. And while you're feeling adventurous, we have an opening in our Tuesday woodworking class. The instructor mentioned needing an assistant, someone with real-world experience." By the time I left the community center, I had committed to 2 classes and a volunteer position, helping other seniors with basic home repairs. Martha had introduced me to several regular members, including Eleanor, a retired teacher with a sharp wit and kind eyes. "First time I've seen you smile since you walked in," Eleanor observed as we chatted after she showed me around the center's library. "Whatever brought you here today, I'm glad it did." I surprised myself by telling her about Thomas and the nursing home brochure. I expected pity, but Eleanor's response was refreshingly direct. "My daughter tried the same thing 2 years ago," she said matter-of-factly. "Wanted me to sell my condo and move to Florida to one of those active adult communities near her sister. Said it was because she worried about me. Truth was, she wanted me to help with her sister's kids and be the free babysitter." "What did you do?" I asked. Eleanor's eyes twinkled. "I took the real estate brochure she gave me, thanked her sweetly, went home and signed up for tango lessons. Now I dance 3 nights a week, have more friends than I know what to do with, and my daughter complains that I'm never available when she calls because I'm too busy." I laughed, the sound surprising me after so many hours of despair. "The secret to dealing with well-meaning children who want to manage your life," Eleanor continued, "is to be so obviously thriving that they have to reconsider their assumptions. Don't tell them you're fine, show them. Make them question whether they've underestimated you." Her words resonated deeply with what I had been thinking. This wasn't about proving Thomas wrong out of spite. It was about showing him a truth he had failed to see, that I was still capable, still independent, and still had much life to live. Over the next few weeks, I immersed myself in research and planning. I took the computer class at the community center, surprising myself with how quickly I picked up new skills. I researched housing options, consulted with Ray about the best time to list my house, and even met with an elder law attorney to ensure my legal and financial affairs were in order. The attorney, Ms. Rodriguez, was particularly helpful in explaining my rights. No one can force you into a care facility against your will unless you're deemed mentally incompetent by a court, she assured me. And from our conversation, Mr. Jackson, you are clearly of sound mind. My son seems to think otherwise, I said ruefully. Unfortunately, I see this often, she replied. Adult children making assumptions about their parents' capabilities without full information. Sometimes it comes from a place of genuine concern, sometimes from a place of convenience. And sometimes, I added, thinking of what Ray had implied about the house valuation, from a place of self-interest. Ms. Rodriguez nodded soberly, which is why I recommend updating your will and establishing a power of attorney that specifies exactly who makes decisions for you if you truly become unable to do so. It doesn't have to be a family member. I thought of Eleanor from the community center, how clear-eyed and practical she was. Can it be a friend? Absolutely. Someone you trust to honor your wishes. By the end of our meeting, I had begun the process of updating my legal documents, including removing Thomas as my sole decision-maker in the event of incapacitation. It wasn't done out of malice, but out of self-protection and a new understanding that Thomas's interests and mine might not always align. Throughout this time, Thomas called twice to check in, which really meant asking if I had made a decision about Sunset Meadows. I kept my responses vague, saying I was exploring all my options and getting my affairs in order, which wasn't untrue. That's great, Dad, he said, sounding relieved that I wasn't fighting his plan. Let me know when you're ready and I can help with the paperwork. I appreciate that, I replied, allowing him to interpret my words as acceptance rather than the delaying tactic they were. In truth, with each passing day, my real plan was taking clearer shape. I was not just preparing to reject Thomas's nursing home proposal. I was rebuilding my life in ways that would make it impossible for him or anyone else to dismiss me as incapable again. 3 months after that painful birthday dinner, I was ready to put my plan into action. I had learned new skills, made new friends, created new sources of income, and most importantly, developed a new sense of purpose and self-worth. The final step was to show Thomas exactly who his father really was, not the diminished figure he had imagined, but the strong, capable man who had raised him, now reinvented for this new chapter of life. I called my son and invited him, Jennifer, and the kids to dinner at my house the following Saturday. I've made some changes I'd like to show you, I said, and I've made a decision about my future. Thomas agreed readily, probably assuming I was finally acquiescing to the Sunset Meadows plan. Little did he know that the changes I had to show him would challenge everything he thought he knew about his aging father. Over the 3 months since my birthday dinner, I had undergone what Eleanor jokingly called my renaissance. The computer classes at the community center had opened up a world of possibilities I hadn't known existed. I learned to research effectively online, to use spreadsheets for budgeting, and even to create simple websites. The woodworking class had reconnected me with skills I had developed during my construction days, but refined them for more artistic purposes. I began crafting small furniture pieces that the instructor Jim insisted were good enough to sell. Handcrafted items like these go for hundreds of dollars in boutique shops, he told me, holding up a side table I had made from reclaimed oak. My volunteer work helping other seniors with home repairs had evolved into a small business. Word spread quickly that a former construction worker was offering affordable handyman services specifically designed for elderly clients. I named it Gray Hammer Repairs and created business cards on my new laptop. By the end of the 3rd month, I had more work than I could handle alone and had taken on another retired construction worker, my old colleague Steve, as a partner. Most significantly, with Ray's help, I had sold my house for $420,000, well above even his estimate. The market had been so hot that there had been a bidding war among young families desperate to live in the neighborhood. With Sarah's financial guidance, I invested most of the proceeds and used a portion to buy a beautiful two-bedroom condo in the Pines, a modern adult community that was nothing like a nursing home. Residents owned their units and lived completely independently, but the building offered amenities like a fitness center, a communal garden, and social events for those who wanted to participate. The average age of residents was around 60, and many still worked at least part-time. My new home was on the third floor, with a balcony overlooking a small lake. Floor-to-ceiling windows filled the space with light, and the open floor plan made it feel even larger than my old house despite the smaller square footage. I had furnished it with a mix of pieces I had brought from home, and new items including several I had made myself in woodworking class. The day before, Thomas and his family were due to visit. Eleanor helped me put the finishing touches on the place. "Your son is going to be shocked," she said, as we arranged a vase of fresh flowers on the dining table. "In a good way, I hope." "I hope so too," I replied. Though I'm preparing myself for the possibility that he might be upset I didn't follow his plan. Eleanor squeezed my arm. "Remember, this isn't about rejecting him. It's about showing him who you really are. If he can see that, really see it, it might be the beginning of a better relationship for both of you." I nodded, grateful for her wisdom. Over these months, Eleanor had become a close friend and confidant. At 64, she was a few years younger than me, but seemed ageless with her energy and positive outlook. We had started having dinner together twice a week, sometimes at the community center events, sometimes just the two of us. There was a growing connection between us that neither of us had named yet, but it added another dimension of joy to my new life. When Saturday arrived, I spent the morning preparing a special meal. I had always been a decent cook, another necessity of raising a child alone, but recently I had been experimenting with new recipes from cooking websites. Today, I was making a roast with all the trimmings, Thomas's favorite meal from childhood. At precisely 5 o'clock, the doorbell rang. I took a deep breath, straightened my new blue button-down shirt, and went to greet my family. Thomas's jaw literally dropped when I opened the door. He had clearly been expecting to find me at my old address, not in this upscale condo building. "Dad, what's going on? We went to the house, but there were new people living there. They gave us this address." His confusion was evident, bordering on alarm. "Come in," I said warmly, stepping aside to let them enter. "I have a lot to show you." Jennifer's eyes widened as she took in the modern, stylish interior of my new home. Emma and Jack pushed past their parents, excited to explore the unfamiliar space. "Wow, Grandpa, this place is cool," Emma exclaimed, running to the floor-to-ceiling windows. "You can see the whole lake." "Is that a PlayStation?" Jack asked, spotting the game console I had bought specifically for when they visited. "It is," I confirmed. "I thought you might enjoy it when you come over." "When we come over," Thomas repeated, still trying to process what he was seeing. "Dad, what is all this? What happened to the house?" I gestured for them to sit in the living area. "I sold it. For $420,000, considerably more than the $300,000 your real estate friend estimated." I couldn't help the slight edge that crept into my voice at this last part. Thomas had the grace to look embarrassed. "The market must have changed," he mumbled. "The market was the same then as it is now," I replied evenly. "But that's water under the bridge. The important thing is that I've made some changes in my life that I want to share with you." Over the next hour, as we moved from drinks in the living room to dinner at my new dining table, I explained everything: the classes, the new business, the investment strategy Sarah had helped me develop, and my new community of friends. I introduced them to the concept of the Pines, explaining that it was a place for active, independent adults, not a care facility. "But what about your health concerns?" Jennifer asked, clearly struggling to reconcile this new reality with the narrative she and Thomas had constructed. Thomas said you were having trouble managing on your own. Did I say that? Thomas interjected quickly, shooting his wife a warning look. I decided to address the elephant in the room directly. I had one fall in the bathroom last year, which I handled myself by installing grab bars, and I take medication for high blood pressure, which is controlled and monitored regularly by my doctor. Other than the normal aches and pains of a man who worked construction for 40 years, I'm in good health. My last physical showed I have the heart and lungs of someone 10 years younger. Thomas looked genuinely confused. But you seemed old, fragile, ready to be put out to pasture. I supplied, keeping my tone gentle despite the harsh words. I may be 67, Thomas, but that's not ancient. Many people my age are still working full-time. Some are starting new businesses or traveling the world. Age is just a number, son. After dinner, I showed them around the rest of the condo, including the second bedroom I had set up with twin beds specifically for Emma and Jack to stay over. The kids were thrilled, especially when I showed them the community pool they could use when visiting. As the evening was winding down, the doorbell rang again. That must be Eleanor, I said, going to answer it. Eleanor entered with her characteristic energy bearing a homemade apple pie. I thought your family might enjoy dessert, she said, giving me a quick hug before turning to meet Thomas and Jennifer. The look on Thomas's face as I introduced Eleanor as my very good friend was almost comical. He was clearly trying to process yet another aspect of my life that didn't fit his preconceptions. After pie and coffee with the children engaged with the PlayStation, I asked Thomas to join me on the balcony for a private conversation. The evening air was cool but pleasant, as we stood looking out over the lake lights from other condos reflecting on its surface. There's something else I need to tell you, I said, turning to face him directly. I've updated my will and my advance directives. Thomas tensed visibly. Dad, if this is about the nursing home suggestion, I was only trying to help. I was worried about you. I know you were, I replied, choosing to accept this explanation at face value rather than delve into the more complicated truth. But I need you to understand something important. I am still capable of managing my own life and making my own decisions. I'm not ready to be shelved away, and frankly, I may never be. I took a deep breath before continuing. I've appointed Eleanor as my medical power of attorney. She understands and respects my wishes about end-of-life care and assisted living. She'll consult with you, of course, but the final decisions will be hers if I'm unable to make them myself. Thomas's face flushed. You're replacing me with a woman you just met. I've known Eleanor for 3 months, and in that time she has shown more interest in my actual well-being and wishes than you have in years. The words were harsh, but my tone remained calm. This isn't about punishing you, Thomas. It's about protecting myself and my autonomy. Protecting yourself from me? He asked incredulously. I'm your son. Yes, you are. And I love you. But love doesn't always equal understanding. I paused, considering my next words carefully. When you gave me that nursing home brochure for my birthday, what did you think I would feel? Thomas looked away, unable to meet my eyes. I thought you would be relieved, that you would appreciate us taking care of the details. Did you ask me if I needed or wanted that kind of care? Did you talk to my doctor about my actual health status? Did you consider any alternatives that might have allowed me to maintain my independence? Each question seemed to hit him like a physical blow. Slowly, he shook his head. No, he admitted quietly. I guess we just assumed that I was done living, that at 67 all that was left was a managed decline. My voice broke slightly, despite my efforts to remain composed. Son, your mother died at 42. She never got to be my age. Every day I live past where she got to is a gift, and I intend to use that gift fully. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the small wooden box containing Margaret's letters. From it, I extracted the final letter she had written me and handed it to Thomas. Your mother wrote this to me just before she died. I think you should read it. As Thomas read his mother's words about dignity and standing tall, about not being diminished, tears filled his eyes. When he finished, he carefully folded the letter and returned it to me. I never knew she wrote this to you, he said, his voice thick with emotion. There's a lot you don't know about me, about your mother, about the choices and sacrifices that shaped our lives, I replied. Maybe it's time you learned. I reached through the balcony door and picked up a box I had placed just inside. This contains some things I think you should see. Financial records from your college years, the receipt from when I sold your grandfather's Mustang to pay your tuition, medical reports from when I kept working despite my doctor's warnings about my back. Things I never told you because I didn't want you to feel burdened. Thomas took the box with trembling hands. Dad, You don't need to say anything right now, I interrupted gently. Just take it home, look through it, and think about it. Then if you want, we can talk again. We stood in silence for a moment, the weight of unspoken emotions hanging between us. For what it's worth, I finally said. I'm proud of what you've accomplished, Thomas. You're a successful lawyer. You have a beautiful family. You've achieved everything your mother and I dreamed for you. But success isn't just about career and money. It's also about how you treat the people who love you, especially when they're vulnerable. Thomas nodded, a tear escaping down his cheek. I think I've failed pretty spectacularly at that part, he admitted. It's never too late to learn, I said, placing a hand on his shoulder. I'm still here. I'm still your father. And I'm willing to build something new with you if you're willing to see me as I really am, not as you've assumed I am. When we returned inside, Jennifer looked up expectantly. She must have seen something in our expressions because her usual polished facade cracked slightly. Is everything okay? She asked. It will be. Thomas answered, his voice steadier than I expected. He looked at the children, then at me. Dad, the kids have been asking if they could stay overnight sometime. Would next weekend work? We could drop them off Friday after school and pick them up Saturday afternoon. The olive branch was unmistakable. I would love that, I replied, a genuine smile spreading across my face. I was planning to teach a basic woodworking class here in the community room on Saturday morning. They might enjoy making their own small projects to take home. Can we, Mom, please? Emma begged, overhearing our conversation. Jennifer looked between her husband and me, clearly sensing that something significant had shifted. Yes, that sounds fine, she agreed, though I could tell she was still processing everything she had seen this evening. As they prepared to leave, Thomas hung back while Jennifer took the kids to the car. Dad, I owe you an apology, he said quietly. A big one. I made assumptions and decisions without ever really asking what you wanted or needed. I'm sorry. Apology accepted, I said simply. That nursing home brochure, he began, looking mortified, was a wake-up call, I finished for him. For both of us, I think. He nodded, then surprised me by pulling me into a real hug, not the formal, distant embraces we had shared in recent years. I love you, Dad, he whispered. I'm sorry I forgot how to show it. I love you too, son, I replied, holding him tightly. Always have, always will. As I watched them drive away from my balcony, Eleanor joined me, slipping her hand into mine. How did it go? She asked. Better than I expected, I answered honestly. It's a beginning, not an ending. The best kind of story, she said, leaning her head against my shoulder as we looked out at the night sky together. I thought about how a painful moment, a nursing home brochure given as a birthday gift, had ultimately led to this new chapter in my life. Not just a reconciliation with my son, but a whole renaissance I might never have experienced otherwise. New friends, new purpose, new possibilities I hadn't imagined just 3 months ago. Sometimes I reflected, the worst moments can lead to the best outcomes if we have the courage to stand tall and choose our own path forward. 6 months after my renaissance began, my life had transformed in ways I could never have predicted. The grandchildren's overnight stay had become a regular event every other weekend. Emma was showing real talent in our woodworking sessions, while Jack preferred helping me with the electronics components of our projects. The time with them was precious beyond measure, allowing me to build the grandparent relationship I had feared was lost forever. Thomas and I had established a new tradition of having lunch together every Wednesday. At first, our conversations had been cautious, both of us carefully navigating the new terrain of our relationship. But gradually, as he worked through the contents of the memory box I had given him, the walls between us began to crumble. "I had no idea you sold Grandpa's Mustang for my tuition," he said during one of our early lunches. "You always told me you got tired of maintaining it." "I didn't want you to feel burdened," I explained. "You were working so hard in school, I didn't want you distracted by financial worries." "But that's just it, Dad. You never let me worry about anything. You shouldered it all. No wonder I didn't understand what it really cost you." These conversations were healing for both of us. Thomas began to see me as a whole person, with my own hopes, dreams, and capabilities, not just as his father or as an aging man needing care. And I began to understand the pressures and perspectives that had led him to make the assumptions he had. Jennifer, too, had undergone a transformation in her attitude toward me. It began reluctantly, with Thomas insisting she make more effort, but evolved into something genuine when she discovered I was a skilled cook. She asked if I would teach her some of Margaret's recipes that Thomas had often mentioned nostalgically. Our first cooking lesson was awkward, but by the third we were laughing together as I showed her the secret to Margaret's perfect pie crust. "It's all in the temperature of the butter," I explained, guiding her hands as she worked the dough. "I never had this," she said quietly, as we waited for the pie to bake. "My mother hired cooks. She never taught me anything in the kitchen." It was the first personal thing she had ever shared with me, and I recognized it as the gift it was. "Well, now you can teach Emma," I replied. "Pass it down." The smile she gave me was genuine, perhaps the first real one I had ever received from her. My handyman business, Grey Hammer Repairs, had grown steadily. Steve and I had hired 2 more retired construction workers, and we had more clients than we could handle. We specialized in home modifications for seniors wanting to age in place safely. Grab bars, ramps, widened doorways for wheelchair access, lowered countertops. The work was physically manageable for men our age and deeply satisfying, knowing we were helping others maintain their independence. The business had also connected me with a local advocacy group for senior rights. I began attending their meetings, eventually joining their board. We worked on initiatives to improve housing options for seniors, fought against predatory financial practices, targeting the elderly and educated older adults about their rights and resources. Through this work, I met Harold Stevens, a retired corporate lawyer who specialized in elder law. When I shared my story about the nursing home brochure and my subsequent journey, he asked if I would consider speaking at their annual conference. "Your experience resonates with so many," he explained. "The assumption of diminished capacity, the well-meaning but misguided attempts by family to take control, the struggle to maintain autonomy. But most importantly, your positive response to it all. You didn't just resist, you thrived." My first public speaking engagement was terrifying, but the response was overwhelming. Other seniors approached me afterward, sharing similar stories and asking for advice. A local newspaper reporter in attendance wrote a feature article about gray hammer repairs and our mission to help seniors remain independent. The publicity brought even more clients and speaking requests. And through it all, Eleanor remained by my side. Our friendship had blossomed into a deep, romantic relationship that brought joy and companionship to both our lives. We maintained separate residences, but spent most evenings together cooking dinner, watching old movies, or simply talking for hours on my balcony, overlooking the lake. Did you ever imagine when you showed up at the community center that day that your life would change so completely? She asked me one evening as we watched the sunset. Never, I admitted. I was at my lowest point. I thought Thomas's nursing home brochure was the end of my story, not the beginning of a new chapter. She squeezed my hand. That's the thing about life. Sometimes what seems like an ending is really a doorway. Today was special. Thomas and his family were coming for dinner, along with Eleanor and several of my new friends from the Pines and the community center. It was exactly 1 year since that painful birthday, when Thomas had given me the nursing home brochure, and I had decided to reclaim the date, transforming it from a painful memory into a celebration of new beginnings. As I prepared the food, Thomas arrived early to help. He seemed nervous, fidgeting with the wrapped package he had brought. "Dad, before everyone else arrives, I wanted to give you this, Jim," he said, handing me the gift. "It's not a brochure this time, I promise." I unwrapped it carefully to find a beautifully crafted wooden box with my name engraved on the lid. Opening it revealed a set of professional-grade woodworking tools, the kind I had admired in catalogs, but considered too expensive to buy for myself. "These are for your classes with the grandkids," Thomas explained, "and for your own projects too, of course." The thoughtfulness of the gift moved me deeply. He had been paying attention to my new passions, recognizing and supporting who I was now, not who he had assumed I was. "Thank you, son," I said, embracing him. "These are perfect." He held on to me a moment longer than usual. "I'm the one who should be thanking you," he said, as we separated, "for not giving up on me even when I deserved it." "That's what fathers do," I replied simply. The evening that followed was filled with laughter, good food, and the warm glow of genuine connection. Emma proudly showed everyone the birdhouse she had made in our last woodworking session. Jack demonstrated the video game skills I had been helping him develop. Jennifer and Eleanor chatted like old friends in the kitchen as they prepared the dessert. As I looked around at this gathering, at the blend of family and new friends, at the life I had built from the ashes of what had seemed like rejection, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. The nursing home brochure that had once caused me such pain had become the catalyst for profound change and growth. Later, as the party wound down and guests began to leave, Thomas pulled me aside one more time. "I found something I thought you might want to see," he said, showing me his phone. It was an online listing for a vintage Mustang identical to the one I had sold for his tuition all those years ago. "I've been saving up. It's not the same one, of course, but it's the same year, same color." I was speechless, touched beyond words by this gesture of understanding and reconciliation. "What do you think?" he asked anxiously. "Is it too presumptuous? I know it can't replace the original, but I thought maybe we could restore it together. Something for us to work on when the kids are here for weekends." "I think," I said when I finally found my voice, "that your mother would be very proud of the man you've become." The smile that lit up his face was worth every hardship, every sacrifice, every moment of pain I had ever endured. That night, after everyone had gone and Eleanor had returned to her own condo, I sat alone on my balcony, reflecting on the journey of the past year. From the deepest despair to the richest fulfillment, from isolation to connection, from being dismissed to being valued. I thought about all the seniors out there who might be facing their own nursing home brochure moments, feeling diminished and discarded by a society that often equates age with decreasing value. I wished I could tell each of them what I had learned, that standing tall in your own dignity isn't just about resisting others' attempts to diminish you, but about actively creating a life of purpose and connection regardless of your age. My Renaissance had taught me that life's most painful moments often contain the seeds of unexpected renewal, if only we have the courage to plant and nurture them. That relationships can be healed through honesty and understanding. That it's never too late to begin again, to learn new skills, to make new friends, to fall in love. Most of all, I had learned that the truest measure of dignity isn't in how others see you, but in how you see yourself and choose to live each day you're given. Have you ever faced a moment when someone underestimated you or tried to reduce your life to something less than what you knew it could be? How did you respond? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this tale of dignity and renewal resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories of life's unexpected second chances. Thank you for listening, and remember, it's never too late to stand tall and write your own next chapter.